and welcome back to another episode of your favorite celebrity deconstruction podcast, Scandal Queens. It is me, EB, the de-influencer you love or love to hate, and we're back on the road again today, biting into the nitty and gritty, digging into another rotten chunk of the Hollywood machine. Yes, last week, it was all about Britney Spears. I laid out the bare bones, right? The conservatorship. We kind of covered the what and the when. But we didn't really get to the who. We didn't get into really any of the meat of the who. And that is kind of what we're talking about today. No, not the rock band. I'm talking about the who behind the conservatorship that kept Britney trapped for more than 13 years. The faces and the shadows, the orchestrators and the organizers of a system that was built to consume women like Britney Spears and really her family. That's who we're going to be focusing on today. But this isn't some general overview. It wasn't like, it's not going to be like last week where I'm just kind of skimming over the thing. No. Today, we're going deep. We're getting into the eye of the storm, right into the heart and mind of Lou Taylor, one of the chief masterminds of the Britney Spears conservatorship. Now, you Free Britney heads out there will have known this name for years, right? For years, Lou Taylor, who you guys also commonly know as Loucifer, great nickname, by the way. I won't fault you guys for that. Some of you are shitty to her sons, but you have a great nickname for Lou Taylor. She's been one of the kind of top devils on the shit list of the Free Britney movement, right? So you guys will be pretty familiar with her name. And it's not hard to see why Britney Spears fans hate her, because long before Britney Spears was imprisoned in a decades-long conservatorship, Lou Taylor was deep in bed with the Spears family and a laundry list of other controversial entertainment industry figures like Larry Rudolph, cough, cough, Taylor Swift, the Maloof family, Irving Azoff, who we've talked about briefly before, Clive Davis, and many others. Without Lou Taylor, it's arguable that a Britney Spears conservatorship doesn't happen, but Lou does not stand alone. Lou Taylor is a symptom of the corruption that has long existed in Hollywood. She's just the most recent face, the most recent mask of a much older and more deep-rooted American system. As we talk about Lou Taylor today and the men who shaped her, these kind of systems she ingrained herself within, I want you to keep the following quote in mind, okay? And this is from the 1619 Project, which was done by the New York Times Magazine. And it was a feature all about the American plantation system and slavery and how America ran it as a business and benefited from it. And the quote I want you to keep in mind as we go through this Lou Taylor series, which is looking like it's going to be 2 parts, as we touch on the Davimos family, as we touch on Irving Azoff again. I want you to keep this quote from the 1619 Project in mind. It is a widely accepted myth that slavery was an archaic, inefficient institution that died of its own accord. The plantation was a place of business, and the whip an essential tool for maximizing output. As we work through this Lou Taylor series this week and next week, I want you to keep that quote in mind. And specifically, as we tell the story of Lou Taylor, the clients she's managed, the people she's canoodled with, and the Britney Spears conservatorship, I want you to ask yourself, has the plantation business really gone away? Or has it just changed shape? And where is the whip now? Before we dive into the deep end, though, let's have a quick temperature check and see what is going on with your favorites in Hollywood. Number one, right off the top, I couldn't ignore this, especially considering what we talked about last week, what we have talked about in previous episodes, and what we're going to be talking about today. Britney Spears has been spotted with Kim Kardashian's hairstylist. Yeah, major red flags are surrounding and sounding after Britney Spears has appeared in a social media post from Chris Appleton, who is Kim Kardashian's personal beloved go-to hairstylist. The move has tongues wagging considering the Kardashian family's involvement with Lou Taylor, a major organizer of Britney's conservatorship, as you'll see in today's episode, mostly in next week's episode. And seeing Britney with a Kardashian team member, it's concerning, right? Okay, it's concerning, especially when we start getting into the meat of what we're going to be talking about today, because Lou Taylor is not just a manager, okay? And the people who work with Lou Taylor and the people who surround those people and it's all, there's no coincidences. Okay. There's no coincidences. So it's concerning. Hopefully this is not a sign of something sinister happening to Britney again. Only time will tell. One thing is for certain: smart people, safe people, sound people, they don't consort with Kardashians. They stay far, 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 far away from Kardashian. And good news, hallelujah. Thank the Lord, past the cornbread. Euphoria has finally, thankfully, been called off after 3 seasons. That's right. HBO announced it. It's done. It's over. Levinson's wet dream has come to an end on the low note of Sydney Sweeney posing as a pornographic infant. And, the world has never been more grateful. I swear to God, it's the best news we've had in probably years. The cast are all allegedly going to be moving on to bigger and better things, like dating Kardashians instead of going to the Cannes Film Festival. And, of course, launching cheap bra lines, which is such a prestigious career move that, everyone with Alibaba can do these days. So I'm sure the sky is only the limit, now that the show that romanticized abuse, drug addiction, trafficking, and violence, all from teenagers, by the way, is now, thankfully, thank God, some small mercy, some small prayer answered in the universe. It's over. It's over. It's all over. Bye, Sydney. And last but not least, Karamo Brown has finally broken his silence about his Queer Eye exit after the bombshell announcement that Karamo would not be returning to Netflix's relaunched Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. He's further ruffled feathers by opening up about his split from the popular show at long last. Karamo's departure was soft launched after the press reported that he would not appear in the group's season 10 press tour. Eventually, the story was revealed that Karamo's mother had actually been on set and had overheard, I guess, Jonathan Van Ness and Tan France and who else was it? Mainly those two. Mainly those two was who the complaint seemed to have been against. But Karamo's mother heard them talking shit about her son, and apparently she came to him crying and said, I thought these people were your friends. And now it's just been revealed that the whole thing was just nasty, just toxic dynamics all over the place. According to Karamo, he was often made to feel like an outsider. He often experienced toxic dynamics with Jonathan Van Ness and France specifically. Karamo himself, however, here's where it's like crazy, right? You're like, God, they just bullied this guy. They were probably being racist to him. They were being horrible. You find out that Karamo has also been accused of sexual harassment on the set. And he says that he was completely cleared and everything was hunky dory and it was all a misunderstanding. But then the other sources on set say that no, everybody just decided to just let it go so they could just get on with work. So I don't know. It's all sounds just really, really gross. But Karamo has confirmed now that toxic dynamics couldn't stay there, couldn't work there. Don't really blame him. It sounds like an absolute mess. It sounds just catty and nasty and narcissistic. And I haven't watched that show. I think I watched the first season, maybe the first 2 seasons. And then some of their personalities online just kind of red flagged me as kind of narcissistic. So I kind of was already distancing myself. So I'm not necessarily surprised, but it's also, I'm definitely never going to go back and watch it. Right. Cause it just feels tainted now, I think, with all of this drama. And I'm not saying this is Karamo's fault. I'm just saying the whole thing just sounds like it's a mess. All right, it's time. It's finally here. We're going to do it. Lou Taylor, the shadow lurking behind the scenes of the Britney Spears conservatorship. Who exactly is this nefarious figure, and how exactly did she become someone tied to some of the most powerful and insidious families and networks in Hollywood, if not America? I mean, I think, having ties to the mafia is probably pretty big. Pretty big. Well, the early years of Lou Taylor, there's nothing really to write home about. I would love to give you something sensational, but much like Irving Azoff, there's just not really a lot there. She was relatively unremarkable. She had a relatively unremarkable childhood, despite the kind of grandiose way she positions herself and talks about herself now. Lou Taylor was born Louise M. Sawyer in upstate New York in 1965. Again, just completely unremarkable, nondescript childhood. Nothing. She She was raised in Henrietta. It's an upscale, quintessential suburb, about 20 minutes south of downtown Rochester, New York. It's upscale, right? It's like families and shopping and all that, but it is home to the Rochester Institute of Technology. And there's tons of shopping. There's just tons of strip malls, lots of retail spaces. That's actually one of the complaints. If you go and look this up online, they're like, well, yeah, I know that there's a lot of retail, but look at these beautiful suburbs. And it is. It's the kind of place that you would see. It looks like the background of like 16 Candles, right? Or like the background in Back to the Future. Like it looks like somewhere that would be in Back to the Future. And that's where Lou Taylor lived. That's where she grew up, this kind of quaint, picturesque little thing. And she graduated high school in 1984, right? So it's not hard to kind of see her as, you know, a Molly. She looks nothing like Molly Ringwald at all, but you can see her having this kind of more upscale Molly Ringwald childhood. She went to high school there. She graduated from Roth High School in 1984. If you go and check out Mystifying on Substack, which is Melanie Carlson, which, by the way, is the main source for today's episode for this whole Lou Taylor series. Melanie Carlson has all the dirt on everything. So please go and look up Mystifying Substack. It'll be in the link to this episode. But she played a lot of sports and stuff in school, but not really, again, nothing to write home about. You can go to Mystifying Substack if you want to see pictures of Lou Taylor in high school. But she graduates from Roth High School in 1984. And you would think that, you know, this is pretty modern, right? And this is this big, ambitious woman who's ended up on this big, ambitious stage, managing the estate of Britney Spears and all these huge celebrities. So she must have like rushed off and gotten this like really prestigious college degree, right? No, absolutely not. Lou did not go to college, which is I'm not sliding at all. I'm not saying that you have to do that to be successful. I'm not being elitist, nothing like that. I'm just saying it's surprising considering the elitist circles that she runs in. It's very, very interesting that she didn't go to college. Instead, after she graduated in 1984, she seems to have just gone into Rochester and started working for one of the biggest accounting firms in New York, called Arthur Andersen. You can go and look this up. It's this is one of these things. There's a few people in the Free Britney movement. Melanie Carlson, again, that Mystifying Substack is one of them, who has brought this point up that it's very odd that this teenage girl, 18 years old, just walks into and becomes an accountant in this major accounting firm, because it's not like the 1950s. This is the 1980s. You know, people have college degrees. It's very common for women to go to college and get degrees. Women are becoming doctors and things, you know, so it's very, very odd. But, you know, somehow she gets super, super lucky and she gets this really great job at Arthur Andersen right out of school. Between 1984 and 1986, that Lou meets the first big influence on her life, and that is going to be Robert Taylor. And he is a Rochester native. He's born there, went to school there, and he's working there as an engineer. And the two meet each other sometime around 1986, and by 1989, they're married. That's it. They've sealed the deal. They know. And Louise Sawyer is now Lou Taylor. The couple settle into Rochester, but not for long, because in 1990, just a year after they get married, Robert's work summons him down to the far and sunny shores of South Florida. Good old Boca Raton, specifically. Do you know the place? Do you remember the place? You know, there was what was his name again? There was this guy that used to hang out down there for years and years and years and do a lot of really shady stuff. And he had this thing with this president. Oh, Jeffrey Epstein's old stomping grounds. Well, yes, Lou Taylor and her husband moved down in 1990 to South Florida, to Boca Raton. And this is where Lou's life is going to take another big turn, because yes, marriage to Robert Taylor is a huge, big first step, which you will see really starting to play out around 2000. But here in 1990, other than becoming her husband, her life is about to take another big turn, perhaps definitely the biggest turn in her professional career. Because after the newlyweds moved to South Florida, Robert starts his job as an engineer, and Lou, who still needs this, she's got like a sense of purpose. She was just working at this big flashy accounting firm, you know, like whoa, she's suddenly down in South Florida by herself, and you've got all these movers and shakers and people with money. And it's not hard to see Lou kind of missing a sense of purpose or missing something to kind of meet with this ambition that she clearly has. So while Robert is out at work during the day, she sets about trying to find a job for herself. And wouldn't you know it, she comes across an ad in the local paper for a business manager. The advert has been published by, very, very bless her lucky stars, Davimos Advisors, a South Florida talent management, sports management firm led by John Davimos, the son of Dick Davimos, which is going to be such a fun name to say over and over again because we're going to have to talk about him. Davimos Advisors, which is kind of like this, there's Davimos Management and Davimos Financial, and it's all of these things essentially under the Davimos family, headed by Dick and/or John and other brothers. There's like 9 siblings or something like that. But Davimos Advisors, they're basically very well established in South Florida because Dick Davimos, the head, he's super, super rich, super, super, super well known, was able to like buy himself a seat on the stock exchange, like just crazy, crazy stuff, right? Crazy. And it just so happens that Lou Taylor comes across their advert for a business manager just when she was looking to make a change in the new warmer climes of Boca Raton. And Lou wouldn't only get the change that she was looking for, she would get a blueprint and a Rolodex that she would write off right into the Britney Spears conservatorship sunset. Now, here's the thing. We're going to have to take a little sidestep down context alley for a second, because the thing about Lou Taylor, as much as she has been painted by many as Melanie Carlson says, as this kind of like devious mastermind, Lou Taylor is not. She is not creative. She is not a mastermind. She is literally someone who has just copied things that people have been doing in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry for literal decades. She's kind of mashed them together and then added a little bit of cult peppering on top of it. Okay, that's all she's really done. But for you to understand that, you need the context of these people that Lou Taylor is now going to embed herself in the 1990s. Of course, starts with the Davimos family, right? So we talked about just a second ago, Davimos Advisors put an ad in the paper. Lou Taylor answers it. She wants to be their business manager. They're going to hire. Wow, what a family to pick, because Davimos, do they have a history? So the Davimos family made their money off of Richard Dick Davimos. Dick Davimos was a bigwig. He made so much money that he was able to buy himself a seat on like the executive board of the Wall Street Stock Exchange, like big freaking money, big money, huge. And guess how he made that money? Guess. Yes, correct. Marketing scams. Yeah. Davimos was a name synonymous with junk goods. He and his partners, he had all these partners, and they would come up with all these basically fraud goods, fake goods, scammy goods, junk goods, and they would sell them. They would advertise them in magazines and in papers and on the radio, and people could write in, send checks, order these things like miracle soil or this miracle house cleaner or this miracle pocket abacus and all this weird little junk stuff. Is basically Wish before Wish. And people would get it, and they would have sent their money off to get this thing, and they would get it, and it was absolute crap. It was absolute junk. The Wish, literally Wish. So it was an absolute scam after scam after scam, and they got away with it for years and years and years. But eventually the Federal Trade Commission sent a cease and desist to Davimos and his partners. They said, you gotta knock it off. It was 1955. It was published. You can go and look this up. You can go look up old newspapers if that's your thing, and you'll see these things. But the Federal Trade Commission's like, you got to stop frauding people. You got to stop selling junk, right? In 1955. And Dick was basically like, yeah, I don't care. So he and his partners keep selling stuff. The Federal Trade Commission's like, right, we're really going to have to come down on you. You can't be selling, like advertising these things on other people's networks when it's crap. Like you're not allowed to do that on other people's networks. So What do you think Dick and his partners did? Like, I should have like a Jeopardy countdown or a I probably can't use that, but I'll let you guess. 3, 2, 1. That's right. Dick and his partners bought the biggest radio network in the world. Yeah. Yeah, because they were getting in trouble for advertising their fraud goods on other people's networks. Dick and his partner said, we're going to go and buy the Mutual Broadcasting System. We're just going to buy the whole thing. And they did. And they made Dick Davimos president of the largest radio network in the world. And then do you know what he did? He started advertising his fraud, his crappy goods on his own network. Because what are they going to do? He can do whatever he wants on his own network. He paid for it. He's president of it. He's got the owning shares. All of his partners agree with doing it because they're also selling junk, promoting junk on the network. Unbelievable. And it's kind of this early shade of like control the network, control the story, control the narrative, like that whole kind of thing. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. They got right in through the back door. What's really interesting about this is kind of a side note is while he was slinging all this junk, Dick Davimos also started selling top 18 hits. They would sell little phonographic records of top 18 hits. Essentially, you remember if you're an old crusty millennial like me, now that's what I call music. Dick Davimos and this other guy, Smith, basically invented that. So you can thank them for those compilation CDs of hits that you like. And then I came all the way from the 1950s. Absolutely nothing new under the sun. But Dick Davimos made so much off of buying that radio network and slinging his fake goods that in the 1980s, he was able to move down to South Florida as this big fat cat and open up a sports management company. He was going to manage the biggest athletes in the world, and he was going to do it from South Florida. And he did, seemingly. Davimos Sports Management was the baby of Dick Davimos. This baby, but he also had his son John Davimos, who is going to be the one who hires Lou, was also closely involved. Now, here's what is so freaking important. This blew my mind when I heard this for the first time. When I read this for the first time, I had to like reread it 8 times and then go and look this up because I was like, this cannot be true. This is why the Davimos connection. There's a lot of stuff, right? Lou's going to work for them, but this story I think kind of sets the ball rolling for what's going to become the Lou Taylor model that we see used in the Britney Spears conservatorship. So in 1986, Dick Davimos, who is old as hell by this point, right? He was running scams and had 9 children in the 50s. Okay, so in the 80s, he's old. He dies in 95. He's old. So in 1986, Dick Davimos, with his new Davimos Sports Management, takes on a new talent. And it's big news at the time. And this new talent is 14-year-old Kelly Horford, who is a 6'5" tall Dominican teenage boy who got scooped right out of a very grim living situation. He came from a very big city. To me, it's a big city. I think they said it was like 78,000 people in the Dominican Republic. And his family was very, very poor. And he and his brother got spotted. Okay. And they basically got scooped out and promised they were going to have this American dream. But get how twisted this is. Okay. This blew my mind. So Kelly Horford and his brother Tito get discovered in 1986. And people are coming after him immediately because you got these giant teenagers. They're like, yeah, let's get them in basketball ASAP. Dick Davimos, old Dick Davimos, scammy Dick Davimos, being a rich guy with a lot of connections, he basically scoops up Kelly Horford, essentially buys him. Okay. He buys him. He goes to the family, says, here's some money. I'll give you a whole bunch of more money and I'll make your kid a star, but you have to give him to me. Not only do you have to let me take him, you have to give me legal guardianship. This old man paid for legal guardianship of this kid. He paid for a child. He paid for a 14-year-old child, brought him to Boca Raton and put him in a prestigious private Catholic prep school. And said he was getting him ready to be the biggest star in the world. It didn't happen. It did not happen. And the Horford brothers ended up having quite a lot of issues. And their family was never given what they were promised. Surprise, surprise, surprise. But, imagine that. A businessman taking legal guardianship over a child and then carrying them off to another country, Boca Raton, Florida specifically, promising their family money, food, medicine, and a future, and all the American citizenship they can one day swallow. What does that sound like? What does that kind of feel like? Oh my God. I found an interview with Kelly's brother. There's basically very little record of Kelly. It's crazy. He went on and played for FIU, which is not great. That's not great. Not great. And then that's it. His nephew is now a very famous basketball player, but God knows what happened to Kelly. He was a 14-year-old given to an old man and taken to Boca Raton. God knows. But I found an interview with Tito, with the family, with Tito and Kelly's half brother. And this is what he said about when Tito specifically was brought over, which again, it's going to be pretty much the same experience. We were offered a supply of beef, food, medicine, and money if Tito went to Louisiana State, Tony Balthazar said. I was offered a job in Houston if Tito went to Houston, but as you can see, and then he kind of holds his hands out. It's an awful story. Tito would make it to the NBA, but Kelly would quickly fade from the public eye after a brief basketball career with Florida Atlantic University. Was it Florida Atlantic or Florida International? I think it's Florida International. Either way, his childhood was sold to Dick Davimos, and it was for nothing because nothing ever came of it. And it sounds like he probably went through a lot of suffering and definitely didn't have his family, right? So it all was ultimately useless, though. As the Davimos family were beginning to find their feet in a new machine, I guess it kind of paid off, because what they were setting off and through a chain reaction was an exploitation machine, not unlike the slave plantations of the Old South. And you guys just cannot convince me otherwise on that. Oh, but wait, because we're not done with the weird, gross, creepy context that you need to really understand the Davimos family and what Lou Taylor was crawling into bed with, okay? Because after the failure of Kelly Horford, John Davimos, one of Dick's sons and the head of Davimos Financial and Davimos Advisors, was determined to make the talent management game work for the family name. He was like, we are not going to fail. That kid was a flop. I'm not going to flop. And he got his big chance in 1988 when the boxer Michael Moorer came into his life. Now, Michael Moorer was one of the biggest boxing talents like in the late 80s, 90s, probably ever, like literally ever. He was like one of the big heavyweight scaries, okay? But he didn't just pop out of the clouds overnight. He was a sports talent that had been hammered into an athlete by the legendary boxing trainer, Emanuel Stewart. Now, Stewart had coached some of the biggest names in boxing. You can go and look them up if you want. I am so incredibly, horrifically grossed out and simultaneously bored by boxing that I was not going to go look it up. But everywhere you look up Emanuel, they're like, he's the biggest boxing talent ever. He coached this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. So if you want to know who this guys are, you can go and look that up. But basically, big shit, okay? Big time. Big time. So Stewart had coached some of the biggest names in boxing, and the case was no different with Michael Moorer, though the relationship between Stewart and Moorer was much, much different than it had been with most of other, but I think basically all of Stewart's other clients, because there was a very strong long-term literal father and son dynamic. Because Moorer had grown up poor in Pennsylvania, Michael Moorer, the boxer. He was one of 5 children. His mother was working just constantly to provide for her kids, to do everything she could for them. And he was apparently a kid, all sources, when you go to look up his childhood, they're like, he had so much energy. He just had a crazy amount of energy. He was just running around all the time. So Moorer's grandfather, who just lived not far away, lived like right across the river or something, right across the creek or something like that. It's Pennsylvania. I don't know. He takes in Michael and he gets him into boxing because granddad was a boxer. He had been like a Golden Glove, winner or something like that. So he gets little Michael into boxing, and at the same time he's making him do yard work. He's getting him into like manual labor, just trying to burn through that energy and pick up the slack for the mother who can't be there. Right. Moore quickly became a football star in high school because he's channeling all that physical energy. He's very strong. He enjoys it. He really enjoys leaning in, getting really physical, but he retains a passion for boxing throughout it all. And that gets spotted by Emanuel Stewart when Michael is 16. 16. Of course it is, right? Of course it is. So at 16, guess what happens? Michael Moorer gets handed over to Emanuel Stewart. He moves in This 16-year-old moves in with this old boxing coach, starts training and boxing with this coach full time. He's still going to school. He's still playing football, but it's like all about the boxing. Pays off because Michael Moore quickly becomes a huge name, not just in the region, but in the country. He like goes from this gym where he's training and gets this reputation of like as a teenager beating the hell out of fully grown, trained, expert adult men. Like adult men are scared of teenage Michael Moore because he's so brutal at boxing. And Stewart's like, yeah, we're doing this. And he rides it right up to the top. He arranges major prize fights and Moore starts building a name. They start making a lot of money. And it's around this time, 1988, that John Davimos sees Michael Moore. He sees this name. He sees this kid winning a lot of money. And here we go. This grossed me out. This was like after the Kelly thing, I was like, it doesn't get worse. And then you read the literal language of this, of what happened next. It's insane. So 1988, John Davimos notices Michael Moore and he decides, I'm going to get in on that. So he becomes Michael Moore's business manager. And oh my God, I just can't even believe we're saying this in 2026 and that this happened in the 80s. Like I'm alive when this is happening at this point, like when most of this is happening. So he becomes Moore's business manager and he does it by he approaches not Michael Moore. That's who you think he would approach, right? You would think John Davimos, he sees this boxer who's making all this money. You think he would approach the boxer. Nope. He goes to Emmanuel Stewart, the trainer who is managing Michael Moore. And he, and I quote, acquires the rights to Michael Moore. He purchases basically equity in a human being in a partnership with Emmanuel Stewart. They are literally doing a business deal with each other over a human being, like they are bartering over a slave on the auction block. That is the only thing that I can see. I don't know how anyone can see anything else, but that's all I can see. Davimos pays Emmanuel Stewart $250,000 for a right to a third of Michael Moore. It gives him a third of basically everything Michael Moore wins in any fights going forward. It's considered an investment. It's considered a purchase of rights. This human being is considered equity. When you go and look up what a slave is, it's really hard for me to understand like what the difference is. But that it was legal and cool in America, and it seemed to pay off because Moore goes on to win so many fights that his managers soon had to start paying competitors. This is true. You can go and look this up. Michael Moore, I think he talks about it himself in a documentary, but essentially he was winning so many fights and beating the hell out of so many people that they had to start paying his opponents. They had to make an agreement beforehand that they would give the loser some of the prize winnings to make up for the fact that they were going to get their ass kicked by Michael Moore. It's just really unbelievably crazy story, unbelievably gross, unbelievably corrupt. And wouldn't you know it, this is right around the time that Lou Taylor comes into the picture. So do you see a pattern starting to form here? A cycle of taking total access over a person, of commodifying them, objectifying them? Do you see that? Am I the only person? I'm hopefully not just the crazy person who sees this. Because what I see is them seeing human beings as a specific dollar amount to maximize profit on. And when you know it, that's the point at which Lou Taylor re-enters the story. So if you'll remember, when we last saw Lou Taylor, she had just moved to South Florida, Boca Raton specifically, with her husband, Robert Taylor, who was working as an engineer. It was 1990. Lou, with time to fill on her hands and lots of big dreams, starts looking for jobs. And she comes across the ad for business manager with all the guys we just talked about, Davimos advisors. Lou takes the job, even though, according to her, if you can go and she still talks about this to this day. She's very proud of she brags about this. She says, I had no idea what a business manager was. I just wanted the job. So she just did it. So, you want to talk about luck. Lou joined the Davimos management firm just as John Davimos was stepping up to really take over from his aging father, who was going to die, just a few years later. John Davimos was 2 years into his relationship with Michael Moore and looking to expand into the music industry. Lou Taylor, as it turns out, was the perfect fit for that and was just the motivated kind of quote unquote business manager that he needed to make that kind of expansion happen. And Lou Basically, the minute she signed on, she was put in the trenches right away. Soon after entering the Davimos management family, the team was hit with controversy in 1991 when Michael Moore was arrested after breaking a police officer's jaw in an altercation. It was the ultimate PR nightmare, but Davimos worked hard to bury the story and continue Moore's cycle of prize-winning fights. In 1992, Davimos expanded beyond the bonds of sports management when they started settling their aims on the music industry stars. Davimos had an easy in with Uptown Records, this is crazy. You have to recall some things now. You have to pay attention. Davimos gets in right there in the early 90s with Uptown Records, which is one of the kind of like little offsets of MCA. Okay. And Uptown Records is headed by Andre Harrell, who was appointed by Irving Azoff, Robert Kardashian's real good buddy. Remember that? The guy with all the mafia ties that we talked about in previous episodes. Davimos gets into bed with Uptown Records, and that's who they're tied to. Just before Irving Azoff left MCA in 1989, or was it 1990? I think it was 1990. It's one of those. He handpicks this Andre Harrell guy to head up Uptown Records. It's like the last thing he does before he leaves MCA. Now, Uptown Records in the early 90s was not specifically, they had some other stuff, but they had this big focus on capturing what, like, the quote unquote black market. That's what they talked about. They wanted to get black artists in and corner black people and get black people's money and get them listening to whatever music they wanted to give to them. Right. It's very, very dodgy when you start looking at it. And Clive Davis, that mother. Anyway, Uptown Records did this through a cascade of popular artists. And one of those artists was Mary J. Blige, whose first album, What's the 411, was being recorded by Uptown. And wouldn't you know it, when that album came out in 1992, the liner notes of Mary's first album, it thanks Davimos Financial. Davimos, thank you so much for helping me and making sure that I could make this record. And then years later in the Get Real podcast, Lou Taylor confirms that, they were definitely involved, because Lou Taylor in the Get Real podcast, I think it's from 2017, she tells a funny little story about how she was literally sitting in the studio while Mary was recording that album. Okay. So we've got Lou Taylor, who is barely 2 years into working with Davimos, in the recording studio with Mary J. Blige while she's recording her first album. Wow. Wow. Uptown, with distant ties to Irving Azoff, wasn't the only musical frontier that Davimos and Lou Taylor were conquering, however, because the team was also in bed with Giant Records, a label started by Irving Azoff after he was forced out of MCA because of his constant mafia scandals and allegations of mismanagement. Now, Giant Records, again, headed by Robert Kardashian's best buddy, Irving Azoff, would be the label, and this is so crazy, they're the label that launches Brian Wilson's album in 1998 while he's under a conservatorship, which is so much like Britney Spears. You can hear more about that on the bonus minisode over on Patreon if you really want to know about Brian Wilson's conservatorship. Very, very eerie. And Irving Azoff was a big fan. The Davimos expansion into music, it's working. So they're in there. They're working with Giant Records. Their names are being put on all kinds of albums. They're working with Uptown Records. And Lou Taylor is in the center of it all. She's right there in the center of it all. She says it herself. She's in there with Mary J. Blige. She's a part of this. Then in 1993, attention shifts because Michael Moore, without a doubt the biggest star that Davimos had at the time, was arrested again for a violent altercation that takes place in a restaurant. And the story blew up, all right, as those things do. I'm a millennial. Mike Tyson stories were every other week. Spreads through the press like absolute wildfire. It's a big hit. And it ends up pretty much ripping out the pockets of Davimos at this point, the official Davimos management group. And coincidentally, so right around this time, Davimos says, okay, there's too many scandals now. We're defunct. But wouldn't you know it? Conveniently, never you fear, 1993, Lou Taylor opens up her own management business. Very convenient, isn't it? Isn't it? Lots of scandal around Michael Moore, and Davimos goes, oh no, we got to close, too much scandal. But then Lou Taylor at the same time opens her business and takes all the Davimos clients. And wouldn't you know the name of this business? TriStar. Yeah, this is the first iteration of TriStar, which would go on to, managed Britney Spears. Unbelievable, the twisted web we weave. And that's how by 1994, Lou was representing Michael Moore herself, basically standing in as John Davimos, standing at the head of her own little company, representing all of these stars and representing more like at the pinnacle of his career, right? Because 1994, this is the biggest fight of his career. It's a prize-winning fight against the heavyweight legend Evander Holyfield, the Evander Holyfield. It's a big deal, right? It's one of those fights. Moore would end up winning the fight despite endless controversies surrounding him, because that same year, 1994, as Lou is taking over managing his career, I'm sure you still have the Davimos people in the background. Moore was also being sued by his ex-wife for a domestic dispute because he, like so many of these boxers seem to do, like to lay his hands on his wife. So, don't anyone think I'm just painting him as a complete victim here, because he's a very volatile personality, which Lou seems to have really helped kind of cover up and, keep him out of trouble. But this is kind of like the pinnacle of 1994. He wins that fight against Evander Holyfield. And wouldn't you know it, Lou got an estimated 33% of his winnings. There was something I was reading that said that Michael Moore, the best he ever took home from his winnings was like $100,000, or that was the average of what he would take home, which is a huge amount of money. It's a life-changing amount of money for a lot of people. But when you consider that some of these prizes, it's like a $10 million, $50 million prize, and he's taking home 50,000 or 100,000, something doesn't seem right about that split, since he's the actual athlete who's in the ring taking the hit. And I think at this point, we could probably note what I think is some other important and interesting context, which really kind of paints the character of who is going to later be involved in the Britney Spears conservatorship. Because Lou Taylor, she still to this day said, like, if you get anything out of her about the conservatorship, it's very much, we thought we were doing the right thing. We always did the best that we could. We were always doing the right thing for Britney, blah, 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 blah. I think if you actually look at this little boxing thing and the fact that she starts her career with this kind of talent management in boxing of all places, really, really adds a certain flavor to it, because there's context to that. Because boxing, I don't know if you guys knew this, I had to go and look this up because this kind of blew my mind. So boxing is considered to be basically the most corrupt corner of the sports industry. There's basically like no regulation. There's basically like nothing. There has been endless federal investigations. If you go and just like look up investigations into the International Boxing Federation, it's absolutely insane. You can't even get through it all. The whole industry is notoriously opaque and impossible to wade through, and it is built that way, right? So it's a scummy pond. Right. And Lou just crawled right into that scummy pond and just seemed to fit right in. I mean, the International Boxing Federation, when she got involved again, do you remember how we talked about how Robert Kardashian decided to get into the music industry just as it was being revealed that the whole music industry was being run by the mob? And yet he somehow seemed to really thrive and do well. And just everything he did made tons of money. As it was revealed, the mob was running this industry he was a part of. There's a very similar thing with boxing, okay? Because just as Lou Taylor was getting in and started getting involved with Michael Moore, and she's doing really well, and she's doing so well that she becomes his business manager by 1994. In the 1990s, the IBF was going through multiple scandals. They had been exposed for bribery, like straight up bribery, right throughout the 1990s. In 1993, they ended up being hit with a federal investigation, not just like some police and some lawyers. The federal fucking government had to get involved, and they ended up like having permanent commissions and changing rules. And there was like Muhammad Ali's law or something that they put into place for racketeering and financial exploitation. Okay. This is like a known, corrupt, disgusting industry. Boxers today, right now, as we sit here living and breathing, boxers pay more in fees to their managers than any other athletes out there. I mean, they pay out so much money. It's estimated that boxers on average pay out 33% of their winnings to their teams. And that's like managers, agents, promoters. And like we said, talking about Michael Moore, sometimes it's even their opponents. They have to pay their opponents just to box them. So you can compare that. You're like, well, 33%, like, yeah, that's fine. No, compare that to the NFL and the NBA, okay, who They have governing bodies, which the boxing does not have a governing body. The NFL and the NBA have percentage caps on what like managers and things can take from the earnings. And the percentage caps respectively sit at 4% for the NFL and 3% for the NBA. So they don't allow it, unlike boxing, which again it's got nothing. No one's overseeing that. It's just the boxers. The boxers themselves have voiced like how corrupt it is over and over and over again. No one seems to listen to them. People still keep going to boxing matches, which we're talking about like the big leagues here. We're talking about major matches. I'm not talking about your local boxers or if you like to box. I'm talking about, if you're a boxer, you know. But we had like Terrence Crawford. He came out and straight up said like the whole industry is just promotional monopolies and all the matches. It's like subjective officiating, which makes things really, really dangerous for people. And there's the organized crime aspect that you have to think about as like, again, just like Robert Kardashian getting into the music industry. Boxing doesn't have a central government. Like I said, it doesn't have a central governing body like the NFL or FIFA does, right? No big, really centralized, we're overseeing shit body. And because of that, it is specifically the boxing industry, specifically vulnerable to manipulation by organized crime because fights literally just consist of two athletes and the judges. That's it. Everything else that happens, everything else that's paid for, organized, put into place by the people who have money to pay and organize and put that into place. Whoever's got the money to do it, that's who does it. And guess who does that in boxing 9 times out of 10? Fucking organized crime. Okay. Organized crime. So it's interesting that Lou Taylor found her feet so naturally and so successfully in such an industry. And to me personally, it's interesting that while she was finding her feet in this industry, she also suddenly finds herself through Uptown and Giant Records and their relationship with Davimos, who she's working with, in the vicinity of all people, Irving Azoff, who Lou Taylor would later claim was a mentor. She refers to him as like a mentor, as a guiding light. Like for you guys who have listened to the Irving Azoff minisode, it's the way he looked at Geffen. At David Geffen. For those who don't remember, just a little brief thing, Irving Azoff, again, head of MCA when it was exposed for being tied to the mafia, specifically the Gambino family. Okay. And you can go back and listen to my Irving Azoff minisode, or you can go back and listen to the Kardashians. It's interesting to me that Lou found herself in this group of people and just thrived. She just thrived. And in the context of who she pretends to be, as we'll see in the next episode, this like super religious, I'm a godly woman, I'm a submissive wife, and I run my business like God would run a business. Really? Then why are you working in a mob industry? You know what I mean? It paints a different picture of who Lou Taylor kind of pretends to be. And I think it's very, very important. The reason I've spent so much of this episode like trying to really highlight these people like Irving Azoff and Davimos is because what do I always say? What do I always say? Birds of a feather will freaking flock together. But Lou wasn't at the end of her yellow brick road quite yet, right? Because co-leaders, plantation owners, after all, they need a little je ne sais quoi, right? Like a criminal network and some really oily, greasy, gross, grubby mentors with some gross, greedy, grubby ties and Kardashian connections. That's not really enough. If you're really going to perfect your grift, you need a little extra spice. Oh, it's a lot to take in, isn't it? We are already waist deep into this podcast and we haven't even heard hide or tail of Britney Spears. And that's because what we're seeing here, what this whole episode has been, is the building of a pattern, is the first block set in the foundation of a big machine. It's 100% Lou Taylor. I want you to see who Lou Taylor is and who she associates with, but I also want you to start to see this big machine. We started with the Kardashians, who are a little piece of it. Now we're moving into the core of the machine, the people who design it, who set it, who run it, right? These are the foundations. If Lou Taylor's history doesn't sound significant, that's by design, okay? Because the truth is, what you see here, what you hear here is the development of a villain in a court of villains, a true and actual student of corruption. This is Lou learning how to flex her wings, okay? Behind this opaque, weird system that's kind of legal, kind of not, which is just that's just the backbone of everything in America, especially in that Hollywood machine. This is the real Lou Taylor taking shape. Okay, what we're talking about now. This is the manipulator learning how to fine tune her craft, how to mask and hide, how to take over like a virus from the inside out. And that's exactly what Lou Taylor becomes, a virus, a lurker who leaks into the fringes around other more talented, skilled, creative people. The only thing she can do is breed and multiply and destroy until there's nothing left. You remember that quote that I gave you at the beginning of this episode? Did you hold on to it? Did you write it down? You know, the one about the plantation and it being a place of business and the whip being a means of increasing productivity. You know, that whole quote from the 1619 Project. Well, we're only about halfway through, but, you know, how are you feeling about that quote now? Thinking about, you know, Michael Moore being purchased as equity from the man who raised him from the time he was 16. Does that, now that you know that story, does that make that quote sit a little bit differently with you? No? Okay. So what do you think of that quote now that you know about 14-year-old Kelly Horford being given to 70-something-year-old man, being given total legal control over him? A 14-year-old from another country, all on the promise of being famous. No factual evidence, just like, I have a lot of money, I promise I'll do this, give me your child. Knowing that story now, does that quote from the top of the episode sit any differently with you, about the plantation being a means of business and the whip being the means of productivity? No. Okay, maybe it's just me. But I do wonder, as we're having this story, especially like you'll see in the next episode, Boca Raton, man. How many other similar stories have we heard of talents, you know, super talented people, singers, musicians, artists, beautiful people, beauties, extreme beauties, being lured down to South Florida, Boca Raton, especially, with the promise of getting rich and becoming a celebrity. Maybe it's just a familiar trope to me because I've sat and read the Epstein files over weeks and weeks and weeks. I spent when they were originally out, and so for me in this Epstonian age, it's just a little Lou Taylor being in Boca Raton, being tied to a family in Boca Raton who's buying children. I don't know about it. It's doesn't sit right with me. Sits really, really wrong with me. But while you and I see these stories as cautionary tales, as proof that the system is wicked and evil and corrupt, you and I hear that Kelly Horford, 14-year-old being purchased by an old man, and we go, oh my God. Lou Taylor did not. She did not. Oh my God. Lou Taylor said, give me that. And she took these stories as blueprints. And what we've seen in this first episode is her getting exposure, her getting handed her first foundational copies, little pieces of a puzzle that she's eventually going to pack down into the ultimate American entertainment plantation system, a system that would become as inescapable and as financially productive as the old South systems that I keep pointing the finger at, because I'm sorry, you're purchasing humans as equity. That's literally slavery. Yeah. And that's where we're going to start our next episode, with Lou Taylor perfecting her message and her program and closing the trap, not only around Britney Spears, but two other major clients who basically gave up their entire lives and were crushed beneath Lou Taylor's wheels. And it's not the only one. If you're on Patreon this week, you've also got the bonus mini-sode, the Brian Wilson conservatorship. And wow, you want to talk about eerie echoes of the Britney Spears? It makes sense. Lou Taylor is not a creative. She is not a genius. She's not a mastermind. She just copied the playbook that was already set down for her. So I hope you'll be here next week for the conclusion of Lou Taylor and her mad descent into fundamental evangelicalism, and the conservatorship of Britney Spears, because we're going to go into it 100% how it happened. You are going to see Lou Taylor for the cult leader that Melanie Carlson coined her as. And then I 100% agree with Melanie Carlson. When you look at Lou Taylor, you are looking at a cult leader. And when you look at the Hollywood machine, you are looking at a giant plantation machine that is run by people in a cult. And it's really our job to deconstruct that. You do not want to be a part of this cult. You don't want to be a part of any cult. I promise you. Being free is scary. Being independent is scary. Having your own mind is scary, but it's better than being trapped. Okay. So that's what we will get up to in the next episode. But for this week, that is going to be it. That's going to be, I think, a good natural stopping place for us, because it's going to get intense in the next episode. So I hope you're starting to see the patterns emerging, and hopefully the Britney Spears conservatorship is starting to make a little more sense to you. If you want even more deep dives on Britney Spears, Lou Taylor, the Kardashians, and all the rest of Hollywood's most corrupt, go ahead and join me on Patreon. I post weekly deep dives, bonus episodes, and you get full episodes of Scandal Queens before anybody else. So if you want even more twisted Hollywood, head over to patreon.com/scandalqueen. Want a more scientific, psychological look at the human animal? Then head over to therealebjohnson.substack.com, where I put my NLP, and psych diplomas to good use on essays, articles, and guides all about narcissism, family relationships, and why the world is the way it is. For everything else, make sure you're following me on all the socials at @TheRealEBJohnson, literally on everything you could think of, YouTube. I think am I still on Facebook? TikTok, Instagram, all the good stuff. You know what it is, at @TheRealEBJohnson. And if you loved this episode, please think about leaving me a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. It just helps the other de-influencers find me, and it's the cheapest and easiest way to piss off your local Swiftie. For everyone else, thank you again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and you'll join me again next week for the mind-boggling, infuriating conclusion of Lou Taylor. I'm so grateful to you all for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It means the absolute world to me. So until next time, keep your secrets close and your receipts closer. Stay scandalous, queens. Bye-bye.